The fourth and final season of Jurassic World Chaos Theory is finally out, and I'm going to talk about it. So, we're going to start off with a little quick spoiler free review, and then we're going to end it off with just a lot of spoiler filled thoughts. I have a lot of unorganized thoughts about this season that I would like to talk about, and so that's how we're going to wrap it all up. Does that sound good? Great. Let's get right into it. So, of course, the story is fairly simple. We know where the story was going at the end of season 3. The campers are all split up. Kenji and Sammy are trying to get into Biosyn Valley so that they can rescue Bumpy, whereas Ben, Darius, Brooklyn, and Yaz are all trying to get in because they want to stop a sort of dinosaur training program. And so that's basically the whole story. Obviously, things go in a lot of different directions from that point on, but I don't want to talk about too many details because I don't want to get into spoiler territory. It was established last season that this does take place alongside Dominion, so you see a lot of hints to that as the show progresses. There's a lot of moments where somebody says something or they see something where you're like, oh, I know what point in Dominion we're in. And so it's kind of like a ticking time bomb because you know what that leads into, so some of the things that might happen to Biosyn Valley over the course of Dominion, so they're inevitable here in Chaos Theory. More so than that, it was a very personal season that really focused on the campers, which is kind of like how this whole show was in general. It was a very human story that kind of dived into their relationships with each other, and there were some really sad moments with that, and there were some really cool moments with that. Again, I'm not going to talk about spoilers. So yeah, overall, I think it's a very fun time. It's definitely not my favorite season. That title still belongs to season 2. I love that season. But it's still great. I still had a lot of fun watching it. I think it's like a solid wrap up to the whole series. If this is the last time that we see these campers, that's fine. We can finally give these kids a break because I think that they ended off in a way that sort of makes sense for them, I suppose. So it was a good season. I did like it. But now we will get into spoiler territory. Now, the way I want to cover this is I took some notes. I took some notes when I was watching the season, and I'm just going to simply go through these notes and talk about a few different things that kind of caught my eye. Now, one of the biggest major things is the fact that we see when they bring Rexy into Biosyn Valley. Obviously, in Dominion, it's mentioned that Rexy was she was just barely caught and brought into there. We never saw it happen, but here we actually see her get introduced into the valley, and Dotson's all like, "Oh man, I wonder how she'll react with the Giganotosaurus." And obviously that's leading up to what we already know is coming. The Giganotosaurus shows up and they fight. We get to see the first fight between T-Rex or the Rexy specifically and the Giganotosaurus. It's obviously a territorial or a dominance sort of thing because it doesn't end in death, as you probably guessed. Instead, it kind of ends like the first confrontation between them, where Rexy simply backs down and the Giganotosaurus is the victor. But then they fight again. They fight twice in this show, which means altogether they fight 4 times as far as we know. And the Giga wins most of those times, basically. So I thought that was interesting. Speaking of the Giganotosaurus, its model looks great. I'm not a fan of the design, but the model looks just like the Giganotosaurus in Dominion. My only gripe is that it's breaking its wrists. Why is that a gripe? Because in Dominion, it doesn't break its wrists. Why can't we keep that consistency, man? But one thing that I want to talk about with the Giganotosaurus is that I think one thing I was expecting, and I think many other people were expecting this too, was that I thought that this season was going to villainize the Giganotosaurus. Now, I don't know how many of you remember this, but when we were leading into Dominion, it was stated that the Giganotosaurus was going to be like the Joker. It just wanted to watch the world burn. With dialogue like that, we assumed that the Giganotosaurus was going to be a worse dinosaur than the Indominus Rex. In fact, I think the movie assumed it was a worse dinosaur than the Indominus Rex for the way that it died. It died so brutally and abruptly. You would think that it was like this terrible dinosaur that was just killing relentlessly or something like that. And we never got that impression in the movie, and we still don't get that impression in this season. It still acts like an animal. It still acts just like it did in Dominion. It doesn't try to chase down Rexy after she leaves. Again, it was just a territorial dispute. For some reason, it had a huge problem with Dilophosaurs as it kept going onto their territory and scaring them off. But other than that, it really didn't do anything that really screamed justified steak knives going into your throat, Sure, it looks scary. It looks like a scaled down Godzilla, but again, it didn't really do anything that I felt really warranted the title of the Jurassic franchise's Joker. And really, had a like, obviously its death was simply just not satisfying. The Giganotosaurus never really killed. It didn't kill anybody. It still hasn't killed anybody. I just realized. So yeah, there's, I don't know. The Indominus was, of course, like a better, it better embodied that description more so than the Giganotosaurus. And this show doesn't really do anything to change that. If anything, it kind of doubles down on the fact that it was more so like an animal more than anything. We do see the Quetzalcoatlus again. I was so very happy about that because I do think that the Quetzalcoatlus was underutilized in Dominion. Like, I think that a giant Asdarkin like that you can get more mileage out of that. So it was great to see it do a little bit more this time around. It landed on top of one of those outposts that we see in Dominion with the campers inside, and it's like stabbing its beak through and everything, and it lifts up the vehicle, which is not realistic at all. But it was certainly really interesting. It was really great to see it. Its model also looks great. It looks just like it does in Dominion. So in terms of like some of these Dominion specific animals, they did a really good job at translating them. That goes for the Therizinosaurus too. It looks just like it does in Dominion. Pachyrhinosaurus makes a huge return. That's something I wanted to talk about because I love Pachyrhinosaurus, and I do like its design in Chaos Theory. There's a little group of them that get attacked by Rexy. And what I loved about that is that they fight back. I love seeing herbivorous dinosaurs fight back. That might sound like a no-brainer, but it doesn't happen a lot in the Jurassic franchise. Well, actually, nowadays, it's mostly just happening to hadrosaurs and sauropods. Ceratopsians usually do fight back, but still, I love to see it whenever it does happen, Rexy doesn't win the fight. The Pachyrhinosauruses, they're able to deter her, I guess, or she gets distracted by the campers. And yeah, no, it was great that we didn't see a Pachyrhinosaurus lose its life from something like this. Oh, and Rexy's bite still doesn't really do anything. Just wanted to put that out there. This is a little Easter egg that I wanted to mention, but as I mentioned in the spoiler-free review, half of the campers, well, most of the campers, were actually going into Biosyn Valley to put an end to this whole dinosaur training program that they have going on here. And so one of their ways of doing that was they got to Henry Wu. They found out that like a lot of the information it's in these servers that are in one of these outposts. So they get to the server and they're checking all of the different servers and they're looking for results of this dinosaur training program, and they find it. And when they pull up all of the files, at the top it says there are 1,993 results, otherwise known as 1993, otherwise known as the year that Jurassic Park came out. Fun little Easter egg, I just wanted to point that out. Speaking of Henry Wu, though, he is sporting his Jurassic World Dominion look, and he's actually a good example of how we can, like, there's a few times where we can tell where we are in the story based off of some things that happen. This is another one of those stories where it's like, yeah, the campers, they were there the whole time, but we just never saw them. And this is another one of those instances. It's obviously right after Maisie and Beta both escaped. Because they're like when they get onto the floor, there's all these workers running around and they're saying all the assets escaped. And Wu even mentions that there's two of them. So of course it's Beta and Maisie. We know that what he's working on, he's trying to stop the locusts. We've all seen Dominion. We know what's going on here. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out because again, there's a few instances where that happens. There's one time where they're like, hey, shouldn't we, is that plane going to be okay? And you look up and it's obviously the plane that Owen and Claire are on being chased by the Quetzalcoatlus. So you know what's going to happen there. And again, it's kind of like a ticking time bomb because we know that Biosyn Valley catches on fire. In fact, we saw it in the trailer, so we knew it was going to overlap with that. It was just a matter of when these things were going to happen. But then they add even more tension. Ben almost dies. So he gets hit by a Thagomizer from a Stegosaurus, and it looks pretty grim. The Thagomizer broke off and it's actually stuck in him, which is probably for the better since it helps stop or control the bleeding rather. And for the majority of the show, we're kind of like, you're building up to a potential death of Ben. There's even like a lot of moments where he's like starting to calm down and he's like looking at this really beautiful scenery and you're like, it's probably close. We're probably going to lose him. And there's a lot of moments where you think, everybody slows down and they're telling Ben how much they care about him. And you think, this is it. This is where he's going to die. Spoiler alert, but most of you should have left by now because this is the spoiler version or portion. He does not die. He does die for a little bit, apparently. He gets taken off on a stretcher and flown to another facility. You get like basically a little bit of an epilogue towards the end. It's not officially one, but yeah. And you see the rest of the campers at Darius's house, and Ben is nowhere to be seen. So you're probably left to believe that Ben probably didn't make it. But then he shows up and he reveals that he did die for like a second, and they managed to bring him back. But yeah, no, he makes it on, which is fine. You know, I did like Ben. Whether or not they should have killed Ben is, you know, that's up to you. Do you think that it would have been a good idea to end the series like that, or is it best to have the whole Camp Cretaceous group stick together with everybody alive? Be sure to let me know. So the story kind of progresses from that. Eventually, you get another one of those, hey, I know what point in Dominion we're at, when you see the locusts flying around on fire, and they cause Biosin Valley to catch on fire, and that adds another element of tension, especially considering the fact that the Therizinosaurus shows up and it starts chasing them. And there's even like this really funny moment. Well, not really funny, but I thought it was interesting where like it put its claws on the window and it just scraped down. I played a game recently, a dinosaur horror game, where the Therizinosaurus did just that. So that's exactly where my mind went to when I saw that. It's kind of like a Freddy Krueger, you know, leans into the Freddy Krueger dinosaur allegations. Triceratops shows up again. I wanted to point that out because Triceratops has never shown up in the animated series. It did not show up in Camp Cretaceous, and it did not show up in Chaos Theory until now, which was really odd. Like, we saw all of the other ceratopsian, like Nasutoceratops and Sinoceratops, and obviously we see Pachyrhinosaurus, but we never actually saw the ceratopsian until now. We see a lot of them kind of like, you know, fleeing the fire or being herded in to the facility, the main facility, because of the fire. And we also see how the facility works. Like, all of those walls on the outside, apparently those are how they contain the dinosaurs when they have them all herded back into the facility. So it was really great to see Triceratops again. It was very brief, but it was nice to see such an iconic dinosaur once again. We also get to see Smoothie's dad, this huge male ankylosaurus, so they get a little bit of a family reunion, I suppose. And then the campers, they have a lot of issues trying to flee the facility. Now remember, Ben is bleeding out. He's not doing so good. Over the course of the story, he's getting like weaker and weaker. He's getting more pale. He's even mentioning that he's feeling cold, which is not a good sign in terms of blood loss. So he's not doing so hot, and they keep trying to use these different solutions to get out of here, but each solution does not really pan out until eventually they remembered that they came here in a helicopter. So they need to get to that helicopter and they need to get out of here. And when this is happening, I'm kind of thinking in my mind, how did the main crew escape? You know, Owen, Claire, Alan, Ellie, Ian, how did they escape? And I remembered they were in a helicopter, right? And they left that helicopter in the main courtyard. That is where the campers landed their helicopter. Their helicopter was definitely swiped by the main cast of the movies. And I was right. Once they got out, they see the helicopter leaving. It's so crazy to me that they were this close to saving Ben, like saving him a little bit quicker. But the main cast is just over here like, yeah, we gotta get out of here. And to help further like enforce the fact that this just happened, that we see the shot where the Giganotosaurus is dead and Rexy and the Therizinosaurus are roaring above it. So it literally just happened. And then yeah, it takes off, and yeah, that's I just think it's funny. It's like, man, the main characters of the movies kind of screwed over the main characters of the show. Obviously, it's not their fault. They're just trying to escape the facility. They didn't know there was anybody else there. They just saw a helicopter and they're like, we need to get out of here. But I just thought it was kind of funny. It all worked out in the end. Ben does survive. But yeah, they're stuck in the courtyard for a little bit and they're still worried that Ben is going to die. Eventually, they remember that Sam and Kenji both showed up in Ben's girlfriend's car. And so Brooklyn and Kenji, they both take off to go and get the car. And while that's happening, these young Atrociraptors that were introduced earlier on, when we see some of the training in action, they smell blood. Now, you'd think that they would smell the blood of a Giganotosaurus, right? And they would want to eat that. But instead, they want to go after the harder to obtain humans here, you know? So they even jump on top of the dead Giganotosaurus. And instead of eating it, they decide to go after the humans. Now, granted, there was a point in time where like the car shows up and the red brake lights are shining on the campers, which is supposed to be like a callback to the fact that they attack red laser pointers, like things that red laser pointers point out. So that's kind of what that indicates. But they were attacking them before that happened. They could have just eaten the Giganotosaurus. It was an easier meal, but oh well. That's how this franchise often is. Just like how Rexy goes straight to fighting after she just defeated the Giganotosaurus, after she just basically died and came back to life. It's implied that she fights the Therizinosaurus. They both kind of go into a defensive pose, and then we don't see what happens after that because the main focus is on Ben. But then we see Rexy actually fight the Atrociraptor shortly after. So, she was still fighting shortly after she got done with fighting. But yeah, they take off. They take off in the car and they're running from the Atrociraptors, but then they get stuck. And then the Atrociraptors, they have them cornered. And then there's this really cool shot of Rexy kind of like walking through the dark forest with her, like her eyes are illuminated by the light. And she just staring there for a second. It was really cool. She attacks the Atrociraptors again right after dying. You'd think that she'd be tired, but that's how this franchise works. All the Atrociraptors, they're jumping her, and it's not looking so good for Rexy. They're trying to get into this specific facility that will allow them to get to to get Ben some help quicker. As it's looking kind of grim for the campers and for Rexy, 2 more Tyrannosaurs come out. They come bursting out of the forest, and the Jurassic Park theme is playing, and it's really epic, and obviously it's meant to be the Buck and Doe. We do see the Buck and Doe at the end of Dominion. We do know that they link up with Rexy, and they're kind of like, they make their own little group, I suppose. It was confirmed to be the Buck and Doe by Colin Trevorrow. Now, their models don't really match up to the Buck and Doe. In fact, I think that all 3 of them are simply just the Rexy model, which makes sense. That's kind of what's happened. Like, the models have never been perfect in this show. Rexy doesn't even have her scars, her very famous scars. She's never had her scars since the Camp Cretaceous days, even though she did have them in the movies. That's just... I assume it's mostly budgetary reasons, and I'm sure they couldn't model whole new, brand new Tyrannosaurs just to show up for this quick little scene. But yeah, the Buck and Doe, they help out Rexy. They're all fighting the Atrociraptors, and it's this really epic moment. And then that's when the campers get away, and then they bring Ben back to they get him to some help, and he gets flown over to to be operated on. And again, later on, we find out that he survives. So yeah, that was like a brief overview of Jurassic World Chaos Theory Season 4. A lot of spoilery filled things to talk about. There was some cool things about this. Does it really make Dominion a stronger movie? I don't really think so. It didn't really do anything to help elevate Dominion. Rather all it did was just state, hey, this takes place alongside Dominion. There's really nothing that it explained or whatnot that helped build Dominion up, I guess. I don't know. It was still a very good show. Overall, season 1 to season 4, I thought was great. I don't like season 3 and 4 nearly as much as I liked season 1 and 2, but all around, I did have a lot of fun with the show. I do like this show over a lot more than I think this show was consistently better throughout season 4 than say Chaos or Camp Cretaceous was. Like Camp Cretaceous, it kind of dropped in quality by the time you got to season 4. That didn't quite happen here. Again, I think that it was really fun, and I think that you would get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's just really kind of unfortunate that they dropped all of the episodes in one day, because now we can't talk about it for weeks on end. We're gonna be talking about it for a little bit, and then that'll be it. Anyway, I liked it. It was a good show. I enjoyed it. I recommend watching it, but that's pretty much all I have for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.